pas de scream juste pretending to be rich.
Story 1. When I first moved to LA, my neighbors were 4 Persian guys in their early 20s living in a 2-bedroom place. They each had new flashy cars, designer clothes, gold chains, and hit the clubs. They used to come to my place to drink and watch some football because they had very little furniture in their place with no TV. They couldn't afford cable. Story 2. Flaunting generic rich people things that literally anyone with an extra few $100s can buy at any time, like higher-end cigars or cognac or luxury fashion brands. Story 3. Overhead the Walmart cashiers talking about a coworker who wears 10,000 designer sneakers. One coworker said he must be rich. The other said then why does he work at Walmart with us? Story 4. I went to school with a guy who at 16 got a professional football soccer contract. To be fair, he was majestic in his talent. I seen him in a nightclub 2 years later. We were both 18 and I congratulated him on his success. He then proceeded to mock the fact that I was wearing a mid-range watch and show me his Rolex. But the success went to his head before he could play for the big leagues. He ended up partying too hard and fighting with everyone. He went to prison for 5 years for punching someone and causing severe damage. Lost everything. I seen him a few years back. In our 30s now. He still has an aura of I am better than everyone. But he biffed it due to his hubris. I'm far from being a rich man, but he's still acting like he has something over me. But in reality, he's just an embarrassing failure, a waste of talent and a waste of breath. Story 5. Trying too hard. Most wealthy people are careful with their money. Most wealthy people don't need others to know how wealthy they are. The wealthiest folks I know all shop at Costco. No joke, it's a surprising trend. Granted, they're surely able to store all their Costco stuff in a massive walk-in pantry, but still. Story 6. You have to own fancy things like a Mercedes and name brand clothes, but can't afford to do anything else because your status symbols take every penny you earn. Also, people who are constantly taking out loans and credit cards then boasting about their fantastic travels across the globe. Story 7. My MIL is not rich, but she likes to pretend that she is by buying whatever trendy nonsense object du jour everybody is talking about, and only shopping in what she considers high-end stores. In the last 2 years, she has bought 3 5K sofas from Pittery Barn. She replaced the first 2 because they were uncomfortable and ridiculously deep when she bought the third, and it was also so deep that I, a grown man, can't put my feet on the ground if my back is against the back cushion. I asked her why she bought another deep sofa. Deep sofas are really in, she said. She recently spent $19,000 on custom drapery for the modest senior living apartment where she lives. When we moved her there, the basement of her old house was full of like unused Yeti coolers, a Vitamix blender that had never been removed from the box, high-end pots and pans she doesn't cook, and a bunch of electronic gadgets that she could never figure out, but undoubtedly saw on TV. If you ask her about any of that, she'll enthusiastically tell you how great and expensive it all is, even though she's never used it. Story 8. Bragging about how much something costs. Every wealthy person I've ever met only brags about how much they saved, never about how much they spent. Story 9. Open displays of ostentatiousness. Bragging about who they've apparently met, had dealings with and the circles they apparently move within, and openly mocking those they perceive as not in the same world as them. Story 10. Carrying a large wad of cash around so when they pay for something they have to pull it out and flip through it. There will be a few large bills on the outside followed by mostly small bills. Like yeah you got 500 in your hands, I have it on my debit card like a normal adult. It's not impressive, it's corny. Also a good way to make yourself a target. Story 11. Gigantic pavement princess. Left lane warrior. Pickup truck with the most expensive trim package, lift kit, and off-road tires that doesn't have a single scratch on it that the driver is barely making the $1,600 month payments on. This might be very North Texas specific. Story 12. As a former car salesperson, 100 vehicles. I used to see so many people daily with zero financial sense, and I mean that literally. They'd come in looking at 40K to 60K SUVs and sit down after an hour of looking and test driving and freak out over a $900 payment, and flat out refuse the 25K SUV that would do the exact same thing, just not as fancy. I had tons of customers that would come in on these 8-year-old luxury brands making 15 hours and trying to get approved on a 30K loan. There is one that really sticks out to me. A guy brought his son in to look at a 5 to 8-year-old BMW sedan. Nothing fancy. The thing was like 20K but clearly wasn't in great shape. We weren't a BMW dealership, so it had seen the bare minimum of work, and was being sold as is. The guy explained that had just been promoted to manager of the local Golden Corral and wanted to be taken seriously by the employees, so he needed a boss car. I really wanted to tell him that he flat out couldn't afford this car, but I couldn't. After hours of trying, we couldn't get him approved because his credit was too low and his salary was only $35K annually to be a restaurant manager. I'm not saying people can't have nice cars, but I'd bet 90 or more of the US is living well beyond their means when it comes to vehicles. Story 13. I watched a video the other day of a woman who was at a salon getting a pedi, and her legs were covered in gold leaf which they then washed away with a bottle of Hennessy, so whatever that was is my answer. Story 14. I work with higher net worth clients and at first it shocked me at how the vast majority you'd basically never know they were wealthy. One of our biggest clients lived in a relatively modest house and drove an older car. I think they recognized money can buy freedom but they had zero interest in being flashy or bringing any kind of attention. Story 15. Having expensive not rare. Just expensive items and being scared AF that something will happen to it. And I don't mean respecting belongings and taking care of stuff. I mean not sleeping at night because there is a crack on your shoes. Story 16 being obnoxious picky loud doom attitude. This just screams sudden rags to riches story or pretentious middle class. Old money is well-mannered. Story 17 a lot of my old friends were hood rich based on dealing drugs. They all got fancy watches, chains, semi-nice cars always posting about themselves being at the bars, but they either still lived with their mom or their apartments had little to no furniture and lacked any ounce of hygiene. Everyone could see through the FOD except for them. Story 18 probably getting duct taped to an airplane seat after groping some flight attendants and punching anything all while screaming that your parents have $2 million. Story 19 I saw someone at a county fair wearing a plain black t-shirt with the word billionaire emblazoned across the front in rhinestones, accessorized with a big gold dollar sign pendant on a giant gold chain. You could see it from orbit so that. Story 20 TLDR not knowing what luxury brands are actually good at making. Gucci's loafers are in the MoMA permanent collection. They've been making them for about 70 years. They go with anything. Any cobbler can resole them about a dozen times before they're truly dead. They've been making luggage for even longer. Gucci's watches, backpacks, sunglasses, and TBH, a lot of the clothing is usually not made by Gucci themselves, and virtually never made nearly as well. It's for people who see a Gucci logo and think this must be good. Imagine if your friend was bragging about a fancy new timepiece he got from Skechers. That's what an actual rich guy sees when you have a Gucci watch on. Same goes for, I don't know, anything from Armani or Tom Ford that isn't a suit, anything from Burberry that isn't a trench coat, anything from Ferrari that isn't a car. Story 21 wearing the typical designer brands that everyone recognizes, things like LV, Gucci, Prada, etc. It's not just the fact it's overpriced clothing, it's the fact it's overpriced clothing that is ugly. Wearing it literally screams I'm just trying to show off the brand, don't look at the design, and it's cringe ASF. I just stopped by to make a comment, but my helicopter is waiting for me. Story 22 the truly, earned it and keeping it rich people tend to have odd passions that they'll talk your ear off about. One guy I know collected old Star Wars figurines, another was a passionate fish keeper, and another funded his wife's career as a fencing instructor, because it made her happy and he liked watching fencing. He could tell you about tours she'd been on with students, medals her students had won, upcoming or regular events, the whole 9 yards. And another loved farming and animal husbandry because he'd grown up in the countryside before making his money in the oil industry. If you go to their houses these things are on show, and clearly, it's their style. Fake rich people are only passionate about the trappings of richness, cars, watches, handbags, designer clothes, etc. And it frequently shows. Their houses have no soul, no odd quirky collections or interesting things on the walls to talk about. Story 23 trying it all. I grew up blue-collar AF and managed to have done nicely for myself. My youngest got to attend a very prestigious East Coast prep school for high school. Mind you, she was a financial aid kid. But the takeaway was the folks who were a tad more quiet and reserved, dressed nicely, but no flashy jewelry or labels and drove the beat-up Mercedes wagon. Those were the rich folks. Story 24 in my experience. A lot of the actual rich people Eve known are the ones who try not to make it obvious but slip up. They end up saying some rich person stuff on accident and not realizing how it sounds to other people. Story 25 selling courses on how to get rich or invest, but instead of spending time on getting rich, spend it on selling courses because they are more profitable. Story 26 living in a rich town and making friends with all the rich people who just use you, but refusing to actually put in any work to better your situation, even when you're clearly suffering, and living in denial, pain, and poverty, but for whatever reason, your image and what everybody else does and thinks is all that matters. Imagine actually thinking any of those people give a, where are they when you need help, nowhere, yet you choose to pretend you're one of them, maybe holding out for hope that somebody will add you to their will or something, and who's going to be there to pick up the pieces. It's all so fake, it's gotta be exhausting. Okay, rant over. Story 27 getting dressed to the nines to go to an expensive restaurant. Truly rich people will drop several $100s on a meal while wearing a polo and shorts. When you can drop foo money on a dime, there is no reason to make yourself less comfortable for no reason. Story 28 expensive brands. Everyone and their mother have iPhones, expensive clothes, BMWs and fly sneakers. They just get themselves on shitty loans and massive CC debt that will cause them huge problems later down the line. But it's not hard to get those things if you really want to, so they're not the flex they think they are. They're just digging themselves into a hole, also copying those pitiful hustle grind TikToks and trying to dress business casual at all times and constantly trying to show off their watch. Actually, rich people have stuff that is super expensive but doesn't look like it, or they look like hobos. I know a guy who is a literal multimillionaire and owns his own company with 600 people on payroll, and if you looked at him he looks like working class guy in his 60s with cheap clothes, a modest car and nothing fancy about him. He does have some expensive stuff, but he really did come from nothing, so other than splurging a few times in his life nowadays, he just lets the company run on autopilot and stays in his farm growing cabbages and feeding his animals. Story 29 I used to work in a high-roller casino room. Some people could buy access. They were tools, the super rich, polite as, helped out with the dishes on occasional. I see a lot of people calling high-end fashion, but it's not quite 1 and 0. If you're fake rich, you on people for not wearing name brands. If you're real rich, You don't on others' choice of clothing, unless you're super rich and talking to other super rich people about why they're wearing an 8,000 suit as opposed to an 80,000 suit. Story 30. This is one of those situations where I can't help but think who cares. If it isn't hurting anyone, then let folks do them. If it makes them feel good to wear clothes you think is too cheap, then buy them better clothes. If they lease their car, whatever, they have a car to drive. If they rent a place instead of own, better than living on the streets. Like, come on people, haven't we got better things to focus on than other than people accepting life for what it is? And maybe, I don't know, simply being happy with themselves. Can't remember who said it, and can't find it presently. But a quote I fell in love with in college was something to the effect of, in a world of consumerism, the greatest act of rebellion is to be content with what you have. Story 31. It's interesting to read through responses, because even the tiers within rich are wild and vast. My parents are well-to-do, but the game changes when you start to get to 9 digits in net worth. A friend's network is all the entertainment executives who have net worths of $250 million, plus 2 billionaire families, including one of the pioneering families of the Bay Area and another on the East Coast, so a mix of new and old money respectively. Once rich people get to a certain level of wealth, they start to get embarrassed about being out of touch and tend to virtual signal anything related to spending. They might even try to convince you that they're normal and are slightly embarrassed to admit that they love Gwyneth Paltrow. They're all about value. Spend $25K on a watch with horological history and value. Cool. Not cool if you spend $500 on a fashion house watch. It's not about the money. They hate frivolous spending on things that wear out like cars, clothes and jewelry, but then will go off to their beach house in Malibu or Stinson Beach. As everyone else says on this thread, designer is embarrassing unless it's bought secondhand or fakes, and the vibe for that day is kitschy fun. People who aren't completely eloquent and well-mannered, not to be confused with being nice. With generational wealth comes generational value on education, well-informed, up-to-date on political trends. One billionaire's wife is regularly featured in the New York Times when she makes career moves, so she's very used to public speaking and has unmatched class and style, not to be confused with fashion. If they're competing with you, you'd never know it. It's more likely they just don't need to compete. People who don't have time to put into their hobbies. The richest people we know volunteer at hospitals for 30 hours a week, or randomly go missing because they went sailing for a few months in Barcelona or started dating someone new in the Ukraine, pretending that meeting celebrities isn't exciting. Rich people see celebs as their equals and still feel excited to meet each other, just as you get excited to meet your new neighbor. I know not all rich people are like this. This is just my experience. I find all people interesting, and rich people are no exception. Story 32. We built a house recently, and our project manager told us that the people who build the biggest houses in our neighborhood are usually too broke to furnish them, paint the walls, etc. Story 33. Judging others' visible wealth. Someone comments on your trash belt while wearing one with a big G. Someone scoffs at your paid-off Toyota hopping in their leased AMG with way over miles. Someone asking what you make in your first meeting. Berating someone for their Galaxy phone that works perfectly while you pay monthly for your new iPhone. Gosh. Money talks, but wealth whispers. Anyone can go splurge on a nice belt. A nice lease has no equity and upside down in value at pretty much any point in time. What someone else makes has zero bearing on their worth. And most wealthy will downplay their answer anyways. Phones are a tool, and everyone uses their tools for different purposes. So much of what I mentioned there is the whole bro culture, where you only have value if you have money. Most of them end up losing half their wealth anyway after their first divorce since they are pricks. Those ugly brown Louis Vuitton bags. Basic by those anything with overt labels really. Truly nice expensive items do not have their logo all over it. Story 34. 100 all-in-one bills. You can toss it in the air and feel rich, but it's really only 100. You know, I used to change my 100 bills into 5 bills at work, made me feel like I had more money, and the bosses usually didn't mind doing it if they had enough 5s laying around. Lol. Story 35. Going on a reality dating show to ostensibly find someone who isn't into you for your money, and then only talking about how much money you have as an art dealer. Bonus points for passing around your probably inherited gold Rolex for the other contestants to try on and only talking to hot blondes. Story 36. Driving a high-end car like Mercedes or BMW, but they leave the used car dealership sticker or license plate frame on. Yeah, I drive this pricey car, but I bought it from Bob's Auto Barn or Jerry's Used Cars, and it has 300,000 miles on it. Oddly specific, I know, it's kind of a pet peeve of mine. Story 37. Expensive clothing that has its brand name gaudily printed on itself. Ugh, no, if you're going to wear nice clothing, just get nice clothing. Don't be a giant billboard. Story 38. Sending your kids to daycare. There used to be this super snobby woman who refused to speak to any of the daycare workers because they weren't rich. I laughed every time I saw it, because actually rich people get nanny soap hairs or at the very least, send their kids to one of the high-end daycares in the city. Story 39. Getting a pedigreed pet, naming it Coco, Versace or Bentley, but then can't afford basic vaccines for the pet. For context, I work at a veterinary clinic. Sorry, just a pet peeve. Story 40. Being unable to enjoy or appreciate the stuff that makes them look rich. My brother is like that. Always the most expensive meals. He doesn't like anything more advanced than steak with potatoes. He got a real flashy Kindle. He hasn't read one book since school. We went to the highest point on an island. He and his GF was ready to go down the second they had uploaded their picture on Instagram, and couldn't for their life understand why I would want to stay up there, and even snickered at me saying AI wanted to take in the view, they're Philistines. Story 41. A guy I worked with used to go to car dealerships and take pics of himself throwing up gang signs in the luxury cars for social media. He'd pretend they were all his in his captions. He'd also find houses for sale and do the same thing outside of mansions, pretending they were his luxury homes. Meanwhile, Justin worked at Sears for $0.50 above minimum wage, lived with his mom, and drove an old Chevy full of garbage. Story 42. Someone that apparently only own one blue suit and one red tie and doesn't have the shelf or closet space to store stolen documents, so he has stored them stacked up in his bathroom. Story 43. People who say my insert expensive car brand or Tesla, i.e. my BMW or my Tesla, instead of just saying my car. People who dress like they just stepped out from a rap music video shoot, wearing clothes with the Gucci stamp all over it. Story 44. I currently work with a number of wealthy individuals. One thing that I've noticed is how relaxed and calm they are about stuff. They don't worry about much, so what now screams I'm just pretending to be rich are the impatient that always make all sorts of fuss. Story 45. Owning a big McMansion in one of those isolated developments in the middle of nowhere. If you were actually rich you would buy one in a desirable neighborhood or with more land around it. Story 46. Expensive cars. All the true rich people I know drive like commodity cars that they've maintained well, like a Toyota Corolla, or if they're into brand names it's like a Mercedes from the 90s. Story 47. I work with a lot of rich people in sales, and it's always the ones who talk about buying everything, then never actually do. Oh, you're going to want to talk to us, we spend so much on, and when they do, they buy the single most cheap item. People who have money don't need to talk about it, their actions speak for themselves. Usually these are the people that want to be worshipped for being so rich. Story 48. Rich people aren't driving supercars to Asda. They take their everyday hatchback or estate car. They buy clothes that are expensive but are quality expensive that last for years and tend not to have a brand badge on them. The richest guy I know comes out in a pair of Levi's and a polo shirt that I know he won at a trade show. You won't think he has the means to buy the bar or restaurant wear, and not think twice as he sits with a pint no flashy cocktails or top-shelf whiskeys. Story 49. One guy told me that his wife was into golf, and there are 2 fields in her area. One open to the public with a parking lot full of Mercedes, BMW and Porsches and everyone looking like in a party with expensive clothes and gears, and another one private or by invitation. His wife got an invitation to the second and the parking was full of Toyota, Ford, Peugeot and cheap and old cars. She asked why and the friend who invited her told that in that golf course all people know that the others are rich so no brag needed. Also, the car will got full of dirt and grass and nobody wants that in her Ferrari or Lambo, so they go there with his cheapest cars and clothes. Story 50. I suppose I'm being dense here, but the idea of pretending to be rich is lost on me. I can't recall ever being around such people, and it's mind-blowing to me. I grew up very poor in GA, surrounded by trailers and gangs were rampant. I knew nobody who had attended college or who had flown in a plane. Nobody left GA, you just try to get by. I took school seriously and spent 13 years in university getting a bunch of CS and math degrees, and then never left academia. My communities have always been low-resourced. Now, I work in industry as a senior leader, and I finally have a nice salary 8 times what a world-renowned research university was paying me. But I'm still insanely frugal and was driving my old 2002 Toyota despite being able to buy a $50K without blinking an eye. The last thing I want to do is to waste money. And even worse, to pointlessly waste money for the sake of showing others how much money I have. What's the point? I just don't get it. Story 51. Entry-level luxury cars. You could have bought the top Volkswagen but bought the base Audi instead. Now you can't afford the maintenance and it runs like, the rich of the rich in my area almost all drive old Lexus or Jeeps. Story 52. Jewelry. I live in a small town and if you walk around with a big necklace on it most likely will cause you trouble. The person I met that had the most money 37 mil wore bib overalls and a button-up flannel underneath. He chewed tobacco and looked like a rough character. He owns a coal trucking business and car washes across the East Coast. Story 53. A woman posted on Nextdoor about her car being broke into. She detailed all the name brand stuff that was taken. She was more intent on telling everyone what brand of stuff was stolen than the actual car break-in. Story 54. I knew a guy that owned one smoke shop in a strip mall with his brother. They rented a house they lived in together with a bunch of other people. He tells me he's making great money now. I ask him if he wants me to help him find a house to buy. He says he doesn't have the money for that just yet. A week later he buys a Bentley. I ask him why do that instead of a normal car and a reasonable house he could turn into an investment property if he finds more success down the road. He said, you have to look successful. And a Bentley does that. It's an investment in attracting more success. Dumb, so dumb with a dumb cherry on top pretending to be rich. Story 55. Harassing stewardesses and yelling. My parents have $2 million according to a friend who worked at passport check security at an airport. The real successful people dress casually and have their suits in special bags. Those who pretend to be, come in a suit, which will look all crumpled after a longer flight. Story 56. Quarreling with contractors over the price of jobs. Normal people understand how to temper expectations. Fake rich people have extremely high expectations and assume that they can bully you into getting things done cheaper. Actual rich people expect the work to be perfect and understand that it will cost what it costs to achieve that perfection. I have all three kinds of clients and I adore the actual rich people. They tend to be the most understanding and friendliest because they know what they want and aren't worried about whether they will be able to make the next car payment if they pull the trigger on this job. Story 57 Insecure references to their spending. I have a distant relative who drops references to her stays at the Ritz, her cars, and trips to Manhattan several times a day in company. Meanwhile, her very down-to-earth husband tells me the only way he can save money is to have their tax refund sent directly to a mutual fund. Anything that hits the checking account gets spent. Story 58 Overuse of cologne, overuse of jewelry, walking around with a Starbucks coffee cups all the time, always ordering the sizzling steak fajita plate at the restaurant, says they drive a Maserati-Benz BMW and you see it's an older model and they can't afford to take care of it, buying drinks for everyone all the time when you know they shouldn't. Wearing Gucci LV but not wanting to leave any tip for the waiter-waitress, though that's questionable for actual rich people too. LOL recording themselves eating an expensive item in an expensive place when you know they can't afford it and trying to act like they frequent the spot all the time. Story 59 When your birthday cake is covered in fondant $100 bills and gold chains. In my time as a server at an upscale steakhouse, I saw dozens of these. Relatedly, when two of your cards decline while trying to pay for dinner but the manager notices that your sneakers are worth more than double what the dinner cost. Story 60 Big flashy logos on all your clothes and bags and shoes. Rich people don't go screaming to the world, look, I have a Hermes bag, or look at my polo shirt, you know, the one that has the logo emblazoned down half of it, it looks tacky. Story 61 Having big expensive cars, lots of gold leaf in your house, orange makeup to hide your pallor, a general disdain for everyone around you and loose bowels because of persistent cocaine use. Story 62 From what I've personally seen, most rich people look like average people, dress like average people, with the exception of higher quality items, high quality clothing, higher quality hats, higher quality shoes, etc. The shoes are the giveaway for me. A rich person will wear whatever they want and will usually want comfort. With price not being an issue, they will buy whatever is comfortable for them. Comfortable shoes tend to be expensive even if they don't look expensive. You can't always go by where they live or the car they drive either. I've known rich people who drive beat-up Hondas and live out by themselves in small houses while wearing outdated clothing. If I had to say, the biggest thing that screams pretending is trying to be too flashy. Story 63 Apparently there is an inverse correlation between quality and the size of a logo. A massive Gucci logo on a t-shirt is a cheap fake, whereas a high-quality and expensive piece of luggage or clothing quite often has a tiny logo somewhere discreet, or even no visible logo at all. Story 64 As a completely debt-free millionaire in a fairly affluent county, I often wonder how many nice houses and flashy cars have high payments tied to them. Big hat, no cattle. Story 65 I live in an area with a lot of wealthy summer people. You can always tell the rich people from the truly wealthy. BC The rich were always with something to prove. The old wealth, the ones with truly you money, just as unassuming and nice as can be, never flashy or rude. Story 66 Running for president while claiming to be a billionaire and starting GoFundMes to pay off your legal judgments, selling gold Nikes, starting a cryptocurrency, the list goes on. Story 67 A couple of years ago I took a flight on JetSuiteX. They are a semi-private airline that flies smaller jets out of their own mini terminal among the other private plane hangars. I flew them for the experience, but my flight cost about the same as flying Delta or United in the same route. There was one woman on my flight who was taking carefully angled photos to make it look like she was the solo passenger flying on an actual private jet. It was comical seeing her waiting for people to clear her camera frame before snapping her Instabait and moving to her next carefully selected fake luxury shot. Funny thing was, the guy sitting next to me was an actual mega-rich guy, who was wearing comfortable, well-worn clothes and was polite and easygoing with the cabin crew as he flew with them several times a week. Story 68 Wearing an expensive Rolex but everything in their life is just basic goods or just a normal house. I know a dude like that and he flashes the Rolex every minute he gets. It's like, dude, the Rolex, it's cool, but you make it seem like it's a part of your personality. Story 69 Saying I'm rich is normally a big clue. In life I have only met a few people that could back up that claim. The rest tended to have a few nice things but had taken out a load of credit to get it. Of those people who have declared their richness to me, more have ended up in bankruptcy than have been able to back their claims. Story 70 Owning a BMW. I know a salesman. Most people who purchase can barely afford the payments. If you're really rich, you buy some mid-range sedan, or you buy a Range Rover or Porsche, without thinking much of it. Story 71 Your car. Rich people don't have nice cars because nice cars make you not rich. They are a depreciating asset that even just buying loses you money, not to mention dealing with bank loans and other fees. Within 3 years of buying a new vehicle it's worth 50 less. You lose 10 to 20 value just after 1 year. They all do about the same job. Sure, some are nicer, faster, louder, bigger, but all you should be worried about it will it get you from point A to point B safely and efficiently. Story 72 Excessive flaunting on social media. Either a Nepo baby who has never worked a day in their life, or fake rich. Real self-made rich people don't flaunt. They don't have the time to as they're constantly in the office. Story 73 Spending $1K on a gold leaf steak at Salt Bay's place or any of the other Insta traps and meticulously capturing it from every angle because you need the world to know you can't make decent financial choices to save your life. Story 74, telling people you're super ultra rich while having a trail of bankruptcies, then grifting idiots with their brand of cheap knockoff watches or shoes or coins.